This is day 2 of the October 88 7-day retreat. There are many questions. Some of which have revolved around what Toni is doing, her role, if any, her authority. And since enough questions have come up about that, we will talk some more about it today, first thing, and then go on to other questions. One person asked, are you ever being questioned by others? I hope I am. And people do bring questions. Some quite freely, others more hesitantly. No one needs to feel shy about questioning anything that is being said. This is when our work together gets into flow and energy, when there is dialogue about what is being said. Questioning it, looking at it freshly together, not to accept what is being said. One person asked, do you have a role? Do you feel you have a role in what you're doing? What do we mean when we say someone is, usually we use the word performing a role. To me it means having a definite image of what one is and what goes, what behavior goes with that image, with that role. As to the question whether I have a role or feel I have a role, my answer was no. Not in the sense of having an image of myself and acting according to that image. An image of an authority, of a teacher. Someone who knows something. All of this is not operating. And yet there is definitely a function that is being performed by me. Right now, sitting here, microphone there, holding meetings all day long, in and out of retreat. That is a function that is being performed. Performed not meaning here with any particular idea of how it should take place other than the time that is set aside for it. I do sit in a certain chair because I have a hard time finding a comfortable chair. I have not found the optimum chair yet for holding meetings, so one day there may be a different chair in there. And if it's a good chair and we have enough money, we'll have the same chair for the person who comes in for short periods of time. I'm saying this, it occurs to me right now, because very often what a teacher sits on is special. I do have this balanced chair, I bought it myself. Anyone can bring a balanced chair. Remember right now that one person who came here from another Zen center said to me, you talk about not being the teacher or the authority, but you sit in that certain chair in the balcony all the time. No one else sits in there. It's that Danish modern chair. It happened in that retreat. It was true. People didn't sit in there, maybe. Didn't like it or kept it open for me, but it is not my chair. It's for anybody to sit in there. I don't know what one is trying to get at. In trying to define what Toni is doing. Whatever I may be doing, saying, how I sit, it's not to set an example, to be imitated. What is said so that we can look at it, whether this is so. And the less a person makes an image of this person who is saying it or makes an example of it, the more the possibility to see for oneself. Someone asked me whether I have integrity. What does it mean to have integrity? To be acting as a whole, not in fragments. It all depends on the state of mind. When there's no self-concern, absorption in oneself with the images, the fears and hopes, when that is quiet, is not there, is absent, then there can be action from the whole. Seeing the whole. Does it mean having integrity that what one says is what one sees to be so? Saying what one means to say, and also meaning what one says. Meaning, can the action not there be a discrepancy between acting and what one says? So often we say one thing and we do another. Or we say something but we mean something else. But the words come out differently, they don't jive. And over the course of years of giving talks, I found out that it takes great care to precisely say what one means to say, what is seen to be so. And in spite of all the care of trying to choose the right words to express what may be very hard or impossible to express, in spite of giving great care to try to formulate something precisely and clearly, it doesn't always happen. It's not clear to someone else, or it may be misunderstood, or just not expressed well. And that is why it's so important, such an important aspect of retreat are the meetings, in which each one of us can dialogue with each other. talk about it, bring it up. I don't understand what you said. It doesn't look to me like that. You may just be saying an opinion, and we have differences of opinion, etc. So there is the possibility of bringing it up. So maybe we can clarify, maybe not, but we can start all over every time. I may have forgotten what I said, not remember precisely, but we can do it over, fresh, anew. Because I said that in the first talk, I can make mistakes like anybody else. I'm no different from you. Or putting it even better, we're not different from each other in our functioning. The great difficulty of finding the right word to say what is seen to be so. And if there is no clarity, then one may not see clearly, because if the whole self-structure is operating, wanting to be somebody, wanting to achieve results, wanting to be perfect, all of this, if that is operating, then there is no openness to perceive clearly. And the mind is narrow, operating on a narrow track. And in that narrow track, there is no open, whole perception. That is why we say from the very outset, and I mean what I say, that what is said in a talk is not to be taken over or accepted, not to be added to one's repertoire of sayings by interesting people, but to be looked at, maybe seen instantly to be so or not to be so, or questioned, something kept alive in the mind, not denied, not accepted, but kept there to look in the light of this question or this statement that has been made. Or, as we said before, bring it up in a meeting. And this is the only function that these talks and meanings have, not to inculcate or to set example to be followed, but to bring things up, ask questions, point things out, and then look. Or look at the same time. It doesn't have to be any time lapse between looking and speaking, or listening and seeing. There need to be no time gap. Whether or not I am an authority figure to people, I don't intend to be one. But one has to watch very carefully, because as many people have mentioned to me, discovering in themselves a tremendous yearning for being attached to or linked to or in relationship with an authority figure. Not only someone who can tell one what to do, because it is so much easier, it seems, to follow what somebody tells one to do than to look for oneself. What is right action? But also to be judged, to be evaluated by this authority figure. Someone mentioned to me astonishment at finding that in passing each other while walking, wondering whether Toni saw that one was attentive, or wanting her to see me being attentive. This is how we've grown up. We've been watched, evaluated all our lives since day one. Maybe already in utero, we were evaluated as a strong kicker. My baby is kicking so strongly. And the hope that he or she will be energetic and lively, and judging by the kicks. And all along, we've been evaluated by our mothers and fathers, brothers, sisters, friends, teachers, priests, ministers. And to the extent that we have been favorably evaluated, it has done the personality and the physique a lot of good. Like sunning oneself in the sight of someone who smiles down upon one. I can notice this so much with our little grandchildren and their friends. Actually, when their friends are there or they meet their friends on the playground, these children also like to be with that adult who is accompanying or with the children. Sometimes the adult becomes more important to the friends of the children than the children, at times. When it comes to, look at me, what I can do. See me climb this jungle gym. Or just wanting to be with someone who smiles, someone who's friendly, who's interested in one. There's nothing wrong with it, but we carry it with us into every relationship, particularly one where, such as here, wanting to be evaluated favorably by this person whose function it is to give the talks and hold the meetings. Because something is immediately projected onto that person. And one wants to be good in the sight of that person, acceptable, excelling, or whatever. One can observe it in oneself. It's there to be seen if one looks, if one is sensitive to it. It doesn't immediately deny it. No, I'm not like that. I shouldn't be like that. Have all of the ideas of how one should be go or fade out in the presence of what actually takes place. I want her to see me being attentive. And to see that, that's enough. It doesn't have to be judged. It speaks for itself, doesn't it? As the person said, afterwards I wasn't even sure whether you were looking at me. And yet that thing was operating. So can one be aware of these tendencies and desires and how they act out in one's behavior, in one's thoughts and emotions. Learn about it. This is the immense value of this quiet week together. To find out about oneself, not to evaluate or condemn oneself or praise and accept oneself, but to find out. The beauty of discovering about ourselves. Not walking and acting mechanically, blindly, unconsciously, unawares, but here and there some light being shed right on what is going on in the mind and how it affects our whole relationship with each other. Yesterday we have been questioning whether it is possible to listen to the call of the birds or look at a tree and its gorgeous foliage changing every day, or listening and looking and being with a person without image, remembrance of the past, without concept, without this past conditioning of what the person did, what a tree is like, or what crows are like. A fresh perception this instant, which is not influenced, shaped, or distorted by the past. We didn't put it this way yesterday. How we put it, I don't quite remember. But this was the question. And someone asked, isn't this perception without conditioning that you talk about so frequently, is this just another pie in the sky? Just an idea of yours? So many people or experts in science or wherever say it's not possible. This is the danger of giving talks, that what is talked about or expressed or hinted at may be taken as an ideal state to be either believed in or rejected or taken for an opinion or a goal that the person who's talking sets out. Most of the time, I put things into question. Is it possible? Can there be a perception? So that when one questions this, not says, oh, I must get that, or it is possible, or it is not possible, but wondering about it. But if one becomes too preoccupied with that state of perceiving without the conditioning, without the past, and either wanting that or denying it or feeling frustrated that one can't get it, then something is awry. Then there's again the concern with what one should be doing. Whereas what is of utmost importance is to see the conditioning. Seeing as one passes a person, I would like her to see that I'm attentive. Also, that's exposure of the conditioning in full daylight, and all the implications of it, the effects of it on the mind, how it affects the relationship and so forth. We talked about it. That's crucial to see what blocks, distorts the mind, what holds it in bondage. To wonder about it, and maybe because there's wondering and observing and questioning and looking, there can be insight into it, into the conditioning. We're not trying to paint pictures of the ideal person, the ideal attentive or aware person, but find out what is it we're engaged in right this instant. What goes through the mind and body? What is the state of thinking, emoting? And what are its effects, its consequences, and also to see it wither away. Or an instant of attention right in the midst of turmoil. the thought, I must keep that, I want to continue it. To hear that and to realize it's the end of the attention, although it can be right there again. Hearing oneself or feeling oneself wanting to hold on. All of this is palpable. All the movements of mind, thought, emotion, feeling, muscles is all palpably observable, feelable to a mind, a human being who's wondering about all this. Person asked, how do you know that what you see is so? Talk with a lot of energy and conviction, but how do you know that what you see is not just your opinion? It's something that cannot be proven to anyone. This kind of thing defies proof, except if, you could say, if two people who are interested in this may see the same thing at the same time, with an energy that is not the energy of thought and image and past remembrances. But can that be proven? That is one of our conditionings, wanting proof, scientific proof. One has to find out for oneself. And maybe there is an insight and things are clear. The next moment they may not be clear. And will one then rely on the memory of the past clarity and talk out of that memory? Begin to preach or teach out of the memory of a clarity that was, an experience that has been. There's no moment at which it's not important to look where the words come from, because words come from the memory of language. But what they're referring to, do they refer to a memory or to what is seen to be so this instant? There's never any moment where it's not indicated to look and question. Is there someone there who is treasuring this experience, which means a duality between me and my past or my this or that? And someone can ask these questions of another, but the looking no one can do for another. Quite a number of questions have come up about practice, the practice of observing the breathing, or using the breathing training the breathing to go into the lower abdomen. And then there's, if one has been doing this, or using the breathing in another way, counting it, or just following the breath, then there's often reported a confusion. Should I do this, or should there be this open awareness that you're talking about? I find I can do the one, many people say, much easier than the other. The concentrating on the breathing comes easier than listening openly without a focus. This was another question. Can the mind have more than one focus? I have heard, said this person, that it cannot. The mind can only have one focus at a time. Most of us have had training of one kind or another to concentrate the mind on something. And it's usually something connected with the breathing. And that practice brings a certain satisfaction or fulfillment, as one person put it. There is something to do with the mind, which wanders so easily all over. It can be trained, and there are some noticeable effects, some noticeable results. One is that it wanders less, the concentration gets stronger, and with the strengthening of concentration, there's a feeling of increased energy, maybe a warmth felt in the part of the body to which the concentration is directed. Whereas the unfocused openness of awareness seems one can't get a handle on it. And interestingly enough, this is most of the time for people who have been trained to concentrate the mind. In the beginning, when we started working here, everyone who was here had a concentrative practice. Now people come who haven't had one, and they don't find it so difficult to just listen, because the mind has not been conditioned otherwise to concentrate and not be distracted. Because this goes with a concentrative practice, that one begins to divide things as distraction or part of the right practice, and the distractions are being ignored or fought. There's conflict with the distractions. No one here is told, don't do this, do that, but we do talk about open awareness. We also talk about concentrating. But one can find or look for oneself whether there isn't a real exclusiveness in concentrating. And whether this whole practice isn't under the auspices of the thought of getting someplace through a practice. As one person put it, isn't this a self-validation? Validating oneself, one's successfulness, or one's getting someplace, one's making progress. Which doesn't mean this self-validation doesn't take place otherwise, and that's what this person was asking, is there self-validation going on in what you're doing or saying, talking about? It can. Any time that one does something in order to be better or get someplace, there is self-validation. But we're asking, can that in itself, that process of self-validation itself, come into awareness? Be seen for what it is, for the narrowness of it. Now, this is not said evaluatively, but actually. Narrowness in contrast to openness. Can the constant drive to do something, to be occupied with something, to get results through something, or use something as a means to an end, this deep-seated drive in ourselves, can that come to light as one clings to whatever practice one may have learned and be performing? And what about the distractions? We've learned in our upbringing since childhood to repress, suppress, or deny all kinds of aspects of ourselves. And a concentrative practice can immediately go into the service of repressing and denying what is not considered right behavior, right emotion, right feeling. Another approach is to wonder about all of that openly, about anger arising or jealousy getting hold, taking hold, or envy or greed or fear. Not to use any practice to away from that, to be rid of that, but to open up to what's going on in this human being from moment to moment. Be in touch with it. Become aware of it. Look at it. Question into it. In that case, nothing is a distraction, but the distraction itself becomes an important input when one will look at it. What is it that I feel is so distracting? And open up to it. Allow it to reveal itself in daylight with space to spread out. And then to observe very sensitively whether what one may think is open awareness is already judgment again, and to see that. And wonder whether something can be seen without any position being taken. Whether judgment can remain in abeyance. Judgment as well as acceptance. So there's only what is, the angry feelings, or the jealousy, or greed, envy, or fear, or the pleasurable sensations. Feelings of well-being, those usually don't give us any problems. Except we want them to last, and we make memories out of them, or become frustrated if they end. To this question, can the mind have more than one focus? If it is focused on something, certainly that's it. That's what focus means. all the energies gathered and focusing on one thing. But when the mind is open and not focused, then the sound of the crows and the rustling on the cushions, the words and the wind, the breeze coming in, pain in the knees, it's not interfering with each other. It's all there. I named it right now because we're talking to each other. But that name does not interfere with the perception. That naming does not interfere with the openness of perception. It need not. If it doesn't immediately elicit a reaction, I like it, I don't like it, then it interferes. And then there's a focus. And then the other focus is I shouldn't have a focus. And the mind divides itself and fragments itself through its shoulds and oughts and words and reactions. And yet the example that's often used when a person asks about this, can there be more than one focus? Right now in talking with each other, listening to each other, there's definitely a focus in attending to what is being said and looking. And yet the birds are heard, aren't they? The movement of some people changing postures, that's there. But if we were sitting someplace in a restaurant right now at a little table, talking with each other, listening to each other, and at another table, people were also talking, we couldn't listen to what we're saying to each other at the same time that we listen into what they're saying to each other. So with language, there has to be a focused listening. One cannot, or one would only get fragments of both conversations. And yet, even though there is a concentration on listening to the words, and more than the words, what the words point to and come from, even though that's going on, the other sounds and feelings and sights and the breath and heart beating are not eliminated from the awareness. They don't need to be. They disappear very fast if one becomes ego involved, hurt or defensive or afraid. Then the mind immediately narrows. And to observe that, to catch that, is a marvelous thing to see how it works. And maybe listening again and noticing the opening up. Which happens without any input of willpower or intention. It happens as the mind is listening, without self-concern or self-image. We will end here for today.